We must work relentlessly for reconciliation between the daughters and sons of Mali, no matter what their political, religious, or ethnic affiliation is. We must be the National Assembly of all Malians.
Sidibé vowed the Malian parliament would not be a simple mouthpiece for the government. The fifth legislature of the Parliament of Children began in Guinea-Bissau. The young deputies warned their elders not to postpone the date for the general election set for March 16th. The transition president, Manuel Serifo Namadio, spoke at the inaugural session to try to reassure them, but the young parliamentarians remain skeptical. They are right to be because electoral census taking has not been finished with only 2 months left before the elections. Masked gunmen on motorcycles killed 5 Egyptian policemen when they opened fire on a checkpoint south of Cairo on Thursday. The attack came 2 days ahead of a commemoration of the 3rd anniversary of the 2011 uprising. Police are preparing for a massive security deployment for the January 25th commemoration, with Morsi supporters calling for protests. They could lead to clashes with police and burning an American flag like happened in the past.
Talks between the Syrian government and the opposition have begun in the Swiss city of Montreux. The talks were convened by the United States and Russia in an effort to end the ongoing conflict that has killed more than 100,000 people, and to also discuss the future of President Bashar al-Assad. But as we hear in this report, the two sides and their backers are as far apart as ever.
Conference to resolve Syria's devastating civil war opened in the Swiss town of Montreux Wednesday with heated disagreements among the two sides and world powers. The regime adopted an aggressive tone for the start of the conference. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry responded by backing the opposition's demand for a transfer of power to a transition government, saying there was no way Assad could stay in power.
There is no one who has done more to make Syria a magnet for terrorists than Bashar al-Assad. He is the single greatest magnet for terrorism that there is in the region. And he has long since, because of his choice of weapons, because of what he has done, lost any legitimacy.
400 kilometers away in Davos, Switzerland, at the World Economic Forum, the Iranian president made himself heard and been invited to Geneva, then disinvited for not having accepted the proposal for a transition government to be put in place in Syria. Hassan Rouhani expressed his ideas. He said the best option for Syria would be to organize free democratic elections. Much further away in Jordan at Zaatari refugee camp, Syrians remain skeptical about any solution that does not address the root of the problem.
Other more successful paths could be taken. Assad is taking the military road. After all this killing, there's no way he will step down as a result of Geneva and hand over power to the Syrian people. We want a no-fly zone, a safe zone, and aid that goes to the people. All we want is to go home to Syria.
For the refugees, they don't care if the solution is political or military. All they want to do is go back home.
Meanwhile, fighting is raging on inside Syria as government soldiers and rebels battle for the control of the country's biggest city, Aleppo. Government troops have recently registered tremendous gains by flushing out rebel fighters from areas around the airport. The Syrian government is keen to showcase these successes and recently took journalists to the city. CNN's Freddy Plenty was among them, and he reports.
Takeoff from a Damascus airfield. The Syrian government packed about 20 journalists into a plane and didn't tell us where we were going. But we soon found out it was Aleppo, one of the most dangerous places in Syria.
The airport in Aleppo has been closed for many months, and the folks who are operating this plane say that we're apparently the first civilian flight that's going to land there since it was closed. Not exactly sure that's a good thing, but we hope it goes well.
Local officials seemed as relieved as us after we landed safely. They sent a welcoming party, including the governor of Aleppo. His main focus, the negotiations between the Syrian regime and the opposition in Geneva. What we want from Geneva is to stop foreign money, fighters, and weapons coming into Syria, he says. We as Syrians can reconcile with each other and make our own government to rebuild our country. The Assad regime wants to show it's winning in Aleppo, though we weren't sure how spontaneous these shows of support for the regime actually were as we toured areas recently recaptured by the Syrian army. Soldiers say they have rebels on the defensive, but the going is tough. Al-Qaeda were the worst people to fight against, the soldier says. They're Islamists. They see us as infidels, and they want to kill us. The situation in Aleppo is remarkable. The city is one of the worst affected by the civil war, and yet the streets in some districts are packed, shops well stocked. But only a few blocks away, destruction is clearly visible, and heavy fighting continues to rage, as we saw when we visited a regime sniper position.
The government is very keen to show us the gains that it's made here in Aleppo, but Aleppo still is very much a divided city. If you look over the skyline, and we are at a very high vantage point, everything to this area here is government-controlled, but everything that is to the left of that is in the hands of rebel forces.
The regime says Aleppo could be a model city for a ceasefire between government and opposition forces. But even with recent gains, with the opposition very much entrenched in this part of the country, speaking of peace might be a little premature. Fred Pleitgen, CNN, Aleppo, Syria.
We now take our second break. And before we take leave of you now, quick reminder of the day's top stories. Building the digital divide, the University of the Gambia's ICT Association has kick-started a tour of senior secondary schools as the quest for ICT development in the country continues to gain momentum. The Syrian government and the opposition have been holding talks in Switzerland in an effort to end the ongoing conflict that claimed more than 100,000 lives. And a drive-by shooting incident in the outskirts of the Egyptian capital, Cairo, has left 5 police officers dead a few days before the anniversary that dislodged Hosni Mubarak. That was all in this edition of the news. Thanks for the pleasure of your company. I am Sylvia George. Good afternoon.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه ومن سار على نهجهم إلى يوم الدين ما بعد لما يلالو جبر لالو والبداودا بافلالي كبو GRTS جان تفسير القرآن بنداتو Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Murutanan be suratul Araf aya keme aya tallulu anin say ngalonu wolto ala ba fala kila sallallahu alaihi wasallam afani moliye ko wontam ala la kila lati min ki al kanal mume be mol be